Hey, we have people from France, Poland, Canada, Israel, Netherlands, Lisbon, Stockholm, Denmark. That's really amazing to have such a variety here. And I see a lot of people from Poland here. That's great. Yeah, hello everyone. It's really great to have you here today. I have some announcements and then I will give the floor to Irina, our first guest. So we as Life Architect really thank you all for being here today. It's we really appreciate all of your efforts in supporting the victims of war. It really warms our hearts to see so many people eager to learn how to support Ukrainians better, especially when such horrible things take place, behind our border. So there are some people from all around the world today as well. Welcome. We appreciate your presence here. It's really great to have you here. We are Life Architect and we are based in Poland. And, all that happens in Ukraine really affects us a lot. So far, more than 2 million refugees came into Poland and we try our best to support them in, these difficult times. And our first guest will be Irina Diyankova. Irina is a licensed psychologist and health services provider in the states of Tennessee. She specializes in the treatment of psychological trauma and any related mental health concerns, including PTSD, dissociative disorders, anxiety, and mood disorders. She was born and raised in Russia and immigrated to the USA in 2001 and lived through the experience of being different. Irina is also a registered yoga teacher. Irina, welcome to the space. Thank you so much for taking the initiative and taking the time to share your wisdom with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, so much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm so honored to be here today and to share with you, kind of what I can in terms of how to support people who are going through really acute and really difficult trauma. I am going to share my screen with you and start this presentation. So the goal of this webinar is the goals as I see them to help you all develop greater understanding of an impact of acute trauma on refugees that you are seeing who are coming to Poland and other countries, and discuss implication of that deeper understanding. So how can you apply it when you're working with or helping, volunteering, supporting, people who are fleeing the war? And also discuss some of the ways that you can take care of yourself as you are caring for refugees, because as we will talk about it throughout presentation, your self-care is just as important as, the care that you provide for others. Okay, so before I even, jump into all of those topics, I wanted to talk a little bit about, kind of my social location as a presenter so that you have a better sense of who I am and where I'm coming from. So as Michael said, I'm originally from Russia, born and raised there. I have immigrated to the United States when I was 28 years old. Now, even though I am born and raised in Russia and I love my country and my people dearly, I am 100% against the war in Ukraine. And, I'm want to be very clear about my position here because my Russian origins may raise some questions, for some people. So I, truly consider this war to be a crime against humanity and genocide. I currently live and work in the United States, and Michael said that I'm in private practice. I work with a lot of complex and chronic trauma survivors. Now, I'm not on the ground and I'm not dealing with refugees, right? And I have never been on the ground during a crisis like that. So my knowledge of what you are going through right now is very limited. And I can only imagine it, trying to place myself, in your shoes. But of course, you're experiencing it, I'm not. So what I am like, the platform that I am coming from is the professional knowledge that I have and the expertise that I have in working with trauma survivors and understanding, how trauma affects human psyche. So this is what, I would like to share with you. And of course, I want to invite you to take only the stuff that resonates with you and just leave the rest. You can just, delete it, throw it away, stuff that doesn't resonate with you, or save it for some later time. So I would like, to ask you to talk a little bit in the chat about the challenges that you have encountered so far in this past 1.5 months of the war. And, during the time that you have been working with refugees and trying to support refugees. If there are refugees among us in the audience, I invite you to share as well, what challenges you have encountered. And as you share in the chat, please indicate what role you are in, what role you are coming from. Are you a refugee? Are you a volunteer? Are you a professional helper? Or in some other role, right now? And so my question is, what are the most difficult challenges you have faced in this past 1.5 months? As you share this, in the chat, the comments that are in Polish, I will ask Michael to read them, and translate them to me. And I would really appreciate your sharing because this will help me guide my, presentation and address concerns and questions that you have been having. And I will wait for you to, write, and then we will move from there. Okay, so I see some comments that are coming right now, that someone is helping one Ukrainian person by teaching them Polish. There is a therapist who would like, from the US, who would like to offer services to English-speaking refugees. There is another professional who is also a volunteer. Okay, psychotherapist from Germany. Okay. Yeah. So thank you, Mel, for sharing that the biggest challenge so far has been her own identification with the suffering of the affected people to the extent that it was difficult to regulate. Yeah, unusual as a professional. Yep, I hear you. Makes perfect sense. Yeah. So someone is.
Irina, should I translate the Polish comment?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So there is the comment of Maria, and she says that she's a trauma therapist and she teaches employers how to support employees from Ukraine. Yeah. And the English comments, you would like me to read out loud, or you would like to read as?
Yeah, I will continue reading them
Perfect.
out loud, and
Great.
I will invite people to really share the challenges, because I see people sharing a lot about their role and what they're doing. It would be helpful for me to see what challenges you are facing so that I can really, tailor my presentation to that.
Yeah,
So,
there's another one in Polish. Karolina says that she's a psychologist and she works in school, and she has children from Ukraine in the school, and there are some projects that help the children, prepare for learning.
right. So I'm not going to read all of the comments out loud, but I'm looking through them, to see, what are the challenges that people are reporting. Okay. So there is, there are some people that are writing about, kind of feeling fear, being in danger in the moment. Okay. Okay. Someone is interested in volunteering. Okay. Not currently working with refugees. Okay. Okay, so we have a whole mixture of, different people here in the audience. I see a lot of professionals and some volunteers. Some people are sharing the, challenges with providing emotional support, helping with logistics, multiple roles at the same time. Biggest challenge is to make social workers here aware of psychological suffering due to trauma. This is a volunteer and art therapist from France. Okay. Yeah, so hearing experience of how sick and in need the people were even before the war. Okay. Okay, desire to understand people more. Preparing for volunteering. Okay. So some people are saying that there is a lot of triggering going on, that it's difficult to assist others when you feel triggered yourself. Yes, thank you so much. This is so helpful. Balance helping others with personal needs. Yep. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for this. I'm going to move on and, just talk about a way that we can use to, one of the ways that we can use to understand trauma that is happening with people who are coming to different countries from Ukraine right now. And so just to give you a platform that I will be speaking from, some of you are very familiar with it, others are not at all. And so the platform that I use to help us understand this is referred to as internal family systems, or IFS. And so some of the main postulates there is that our human minds are multiplicit. And so we have multiple aspects and multiple different parts that are all working together in our psyche. And this is very normal. And that this system of multiple parts that our psyche has a core that is referred to as the self. So the self may be understood by some as the soul. It has spiritual component to it. It cannot be harmed in any circumstances. However, the parts, that surround self tend to really protect it, because this is one of the biggest fear that our psyche carries is, to really be harmed on a very deep and core level. So what is this self? So every person has it. Again, it has spiritual component to it. It's sometimes referred to in different traditions as the soul. It's both a part and a wave. It has certain energy associated with it. And when our parts, normally self is at the front wheel driving the bus, so to speak, of our system, of our psyche forward, using parts as resources and helpers, and sometimes giving the wheel to them. However, when our different parts blend with self, then the qualities of self, of our soul, are not really available to us. And so those qualities that our soul or self possesses are compassion, curiosity, openness, courage, acceptance, and so forth. So it's like this really benevolent force within us that is driving us and our system towards well-being. So in the normal state, when we are not traumatized, our system may look like something that you see on the slide here. So the soul or self is in the middle and is surrounded by and connected with different parts, different aspects of us. These parts play different roles in our systems. Some of them manage our day-to-day life, others protect us from danger, others, carry emotions and emotional aspects of our experience, and so forth. So you can think, about our psyche as, parallel to the composition of our psyche is in some ways parallel to the structure of our body. So our body can be referred to as one piece and was one system. At the same time, it has very distinctive organs and tissues and cells that are all connected with each other and all function together, perhaps with the leadership from our brain, our heart, or, some other aspects in our bodies. So what happens, when a person, an individual is hit by something that is really shocking and that psyche cannot really digest in the moment, which we refer to as trauma. Trauma is an overwhelming experience that really, makes a person's kind of system, person's brain, overwhelmed and overloaded. And so it really changes survivor on all the levels of his or her being: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic, social, on all levels. So even though the traumatic experience may be very short-lived, so let's take the situation of a war, right? Maybe maybe refugee that you are seeing, that you are helping, that you are supporting, maybe they have, spent a day in the, bomb shelter, hiding, from the bombs, and then they very quickly evacuated from the area and they came to Poland and they're safe right now. And, some of us may think, well, what's the big deal? They just spent one day, in this bomb shelter. Their life was never really in danger. How deeply could they be affected? But, it's like you can think about it from the perspective that their life changed forever. There is this point, of like when the war started, right? And when people first, learned about this experience, learned about what is happening, right? Whether they have been under bombs, whether they have been in an area that has been relatively safe, whether they lost anybody or not, their lives have been changed forever, just by the virtue, of the war starting on their territory and by the virtue of them being attacked, their country, their safety being attacked by another country. And so how does our system respond to trauma? The response is actually very intelligent, and I really want to emphasize that. Sometimes we look at it from the perspective, it makes person broken, and then they're responding in such an extreme way, and there is something wrong with them. Actually, no. I want to emphasize the beauty and intelligence in this response. It's a survival response. And from the perspective of, internal family systems, what really happens is that, after trauma, we are left with a lot of parts that are hurt or wounded. So those are the parts that take the impact on themselves. In some ways, they sacrifice themselves so that the rest of the system can continue living and moving forward. And so those parts, grab onto and contain within themselves those awful, horrible, images, thoughts, feelings, emotions, they take them on. And so if we don't tend to those parts, right, they can wreak havoc on a psyche, producing all kinds of different symptoms, such as extreme fear, hopelessness and grief, hurt and pain, shame, sadness, overwhelming distress, and so forth. However, there are non-wounded parts in our system that are responding to the traumatic situation by a number of different actions. So the first one, they're kicking self, our soul, our core, out of the driver's seat, rescuing and hiding it. Because remember, that's like one of the major goals of some of the parts of our system is to protect our soul, our spirit, right? So they disconnect from it, they push it out. And then they exile the parts that are hurting. So the ones that took all the wounding experiences on, they get, pushed out of the consciousness so that the person can, continue surviving and moving forward with their lives. And then those non-wounded parts, they take on themselves one of the protective functions. So it may be, distracting a person from all the screams of the wounded parts that they hear and experience inside. It may be, over-functioning or working hard, kind of trying to situate a person's life to create some kind of, safety and resemblance of, normalcy and routine. It may also be parts that shut system down, right? So like freeze, and this is also a very adaptive response because it allows the person to save resources and preserve, the major life functions, such as breathing, for example. And so, unfortunately, all these parts in the process get disconnected from each other and from the self. And so, as a result, the person, actually going to skip this slide, may feel, come back to this. As a result, the person may feel quite discombobulated, to those people that are interacting with them. A couple of other things. I'm going to skip one slide here and come to this slide that also helps us understand some of the changes. So if we think about, our personalities as continuums of different traits, right? So I just gave some examples of the traits that, we all carry and we are all on this continuum somewhere. So for example, autonomous versus dependent. We all have some degree of autonomy, some degree of dependence, and we can be closer to autonomous or closer to dependent end of the continuum. Planful versus spontaneous, active versus passive, cognitive versus emotional, right? And some of us will be like right in the middle, others will be a little closer, to one end or another. And so just for example, let's take two people, right? P1, person one and person two. So our person one was, kind of a little bit closer to this side of the continuums that I have just named. Maybe a little bit more autonomous, a little bit more planful, a little bit more active, a little bit more cognitive than, an average person. And then we have person two, who has been maybe a little bit more dependent on others, a little bit more spontaneous, maybe a little more passive, and a little bit more emotional in terms of their traits. So what happens post-trauma is these traits get exacerbated. It's like they're pushed to the extreme poles, to the extremes, right? And this is because, again, our parts that carry those traits, they become more extreme because they're trying to respond to a very extreme situation. And war is one of the most extreme situations that a human being can encounter, right? It's just really, fighting for their lives, right? It's life or death situation. There is no question about it. And so as a result of that, the parts step into more extreme roles. And so if we had, person one who had been somewhat autonomous, they may become so extremely independent and so reluctant to receive any kind of help or use any kinds of resources that they may be difficult to support because in their behavior, they will be rejecting of help. And if we have person two here who had become very dependent as a result of this experience, they may also be difficult to care for because it may feel like they cannot do anything for themselves and they're relying on other people to provide everything and take care of them and every one of their needs, right? So, and again, I just want to emphasize that this is normal response of the human psyche to the very abnormal situation of the war. There is absolutely nothing wrong with them. And of course, people respond in a variety of different ways, and there is no right or wrong way to respond. All right, so just again, another illustration here. So we talked about, self or soul being kind of like, ejected, so to speak, or pushed to the, edge of our system, which makes it really difficult for people to be balanced, in their emotions and their thoughts and their feelings and their responses, because self is a great balancer in our system. And when it's not available, we cannot really do that. And then there are other parts that get disconnected from each other. And so as a result, you may see only a couple of facets, of the survivor, and really have no idea what else might be happening behind the scenes, so to speak. And those couple of facets may also be pretty disconnected from each other. So, for example, sometimes you may see an angry part of the person. At other times, maybe you can see a part that is, trying to use different substances or other, addictive processes, helping person to cope. At other times, you may see a part that is completely overwhelmed, and, you know, um, to the extreme level by the experience, and those parts can come back and forth, and it almost like you may feel that you are dealing with three different people, not just one person, but like three different people, depending on what part is in the driver's seat in the moment. And when people respond, when people behave, in interactions with us, in like extreme, from the extreme, parts and extreme behaviors, this often causes us, to become reactive as well. And so we become reactive as opposed to, balanced and centered in our own responses. So that's very natural too. So, for example, in response, to someone's anger, you may feel like, you are trying to reason with them, and you're trying, to help them de-escalate, but it's like beating your head against the wall. Or you may, come at the person from a state of trying to fix and help and doing all kinds of things for them, right? You may come at them from the, perspective of a savior, someone who is, gonna maybe heal them and help them, overcome their pain. And so there is the saying in IFS that parts and behaviors that come from the parts pull parts, or they, produce parts. So when someone comes at us from a part, we tend to respond to them in a reactive way from our own part. And this is how, all kinds of conflicts happen in the relationships between people, and how things get escalated. Now, what I would like for you to understand is that when you are dealing with a survivor, with a refugee, most of the factors that contribute to their response or their interaction with you have absolutely nothing to do with you in particular, you as an individual, you as a person. If we are talking about severely traumatized individual, we are talking about 95% of, their response is being caused by and directed by trauma that they have experienced just, a little while ago, right? So 95% of their psychic response is still responding to those events, even though there is a part of them that knows that they are out of that situation, they're present here with you, but the situation was so overwhelming and so undigestible that it is almost impossible to be this adequate human being, with 2 feet on the ground, who can see another human being that is trying to help them and who is, responding kind of like in this adequate way, right? It's almost impossible task for a person in this situation. And so it helps if you understand that, like, what you say or do, I put helpers in the red segment here, uh, may produce very small impact, on the person's response and on their reaction. And that helps us to, not take things personally when something is flying towards us that we feel like, as helpers, maybe we did not deserve. So I also want to emphasize that there is no right or wrong way to cope. again, just remembering that people that, we are dealing with as helpers came from very, very extreme situations, and a reminder to, refugees and survivors of war, themselves, that, you came from very extreme situation. And so, it's okay. It's okay to have those behaviors and extreme ways, of coping and responding. So I want to remind all of us that each behavior, even the most extreme one, has a positive intent underneath it. And this positive intent may be to protect a person, to keep them safe. It may be to prevent humiliation, shame, pain, or other difficult emotions that they have experienced, during trauma from surfacing. So kind of keeping all of those emotions down. And in all of those behaviors, they are aimed at increasing the chance of survival. So, some of you may say, well, like a person, when they came to a different country and they escaped the situation of war, they have already survived, right? So why are they still in the survival response? And the thing is, the body has survived, but the psyche will continue surviving for a very long time. So like this message, and actually we cannot even give them the message that the war is over, because the war is not over. So the person is, even though they may be physically safe, in the country in, which they are displaced and living right now, they're emotionally still not safe, because the war keeps going, and their people, their families, their friends, are being harmed as we speak. Their country is being destroyed. And so, but even when we come to the situation and let's say that the war is over, the emotional war inside is not going to be over for a very long time. It takes very long time to heal. And it's a whole journey, of healing that only can start after, the war is over and there is some kind of peace that, has been brought in. So, I am going to pause here and see, if there are actually, no, I'm not going to pause here because I'm looking at the time, and I'm going to continue moving us forward. I would like to offer a little guided meditation to all of you right now that, you can come back to and use for yourself. And you can also share this, with anybody that you are helping. So I invite you to find comfortable seat. Um, and if possible, I invite you to bring your feet to the ground. So both feet on the ground, or at least provide some kind of support for your feet so that they are fully supported. I invite you to pay attention to your sitting bones, your legs, your lower back, making sure that all of those areas of your body get support as well. And then as you get physically into more or less comfortable pose, I invite you to start drawing your attention inside, perhaps closing your eyes or half closing them. Or if it doesn't feel safe to close them, it's okay to keep them open. You can find some kind of spot on the wall in your physical environment to focus on. And as you continue drawing your attention inside, I invite you to start mentally scanning your central energy channel that enters your body through the opening, energetic opening in your head, moves through the center of your skull, through and around your spine, and exits your body where the spine ends. And so I just invite you to kind of notice how is energy flowing through the central energy channel in your body. And there is actually two-way flow of energy, from up to down and then from down up. So just noticing that in some areas of your body, the energy through the central channel may be flowing really well. and there are no barriers there, and it seems that there is even pace there. And then you may encounter some places, regions, and spaces in this channel where it feels different. Maybe there is a speed up of energy, or maybe slowing down. You may notice some obstacle on the way of energy, and perhaps it starts gathering and pulsating and intensifying in some area of your spine or maybe your skull. There may be some energies where energy doesn't even touch, like numb areas, empty areas. And so when you notice those areas, I just invite you to send compassion to them and ask the parts of you that are regulating flow in these particular regions to relax for few moments, maybe a minute or 2 or 5, no more than that. To allow energy in that area to flow freely. And so just continue moving through your channel like that. Asking for a little bit of relaxation and space for the next few minutes. So that you can really feel this two-way flow of energy through your body. This energy that also connects us to the sky and to the earth, to the universe around us. And just a friendly reminder here that if what I'm suggesting is not working for you, it is completely okay to just tune me out and be with your own experience and use your own words to name those experiences. Some of you may want to continue staying with this process of, noticing different areas in your central channel that are affected and asking the parts to relax. Others may want to step into that flow. Like if you feel that the flow has been restored and there is a two-way flow right now through your body, I invite you to step into it for just a few moments and just notice what it feels like to be in that channel, to allow that energy to flow through your body freely. And at this point, I would like you to know that we will be wrapping up this experience. And so just check with the parts of you that have been regulating the flow of energy through this channel. Check to see if some of them may be willing to continue staying back for the rest of this webinar, maybe even for the next webinar, to allow you to continue staying in this flow. And some parts may agree with this, others may not. Your parts may step and interrupt this flow right away, independently of those decisions that your protective parts make. Just send appreciation to them. Because there is a really great purpose and goal behind them, trying to protect you and your energy and your body in the ways that they're doing. So if possible, just send them acknowledgement and appreciation for their wisdom. And then as you get ready, start shifting focus of your attention from inside back to the outside. You may want to look around your physical room. You may want to stretch your body, maybe change the position that you are in, maybe even get up and move in some way. All right. And if you would like, to share your experience with this meditation in the chat, that would be wonderful. And I will, as you're sharing, I will go through a couple of slides and then I will come back to the experiences that you have shared with this meditation. So moving on with our material. If you're a refugee who is, listening to this webinar right now, what can you do as a refugee to continue, supporting yourself, to continue, moving through your life? So the first thing that I would suggest is give yourself plenty of grace, tons and tons and tons of grace. And just remind yourself that you are doing the best you can right now with a completely awful situation. Really dysregulating, displacing, violent, and so forth. So your responses are normal reactions to the abnormal situation. It may also be helpful for some, or maybe not right now. You may come back to that. To recognize that there is no back to normal. I know that like a lot of people, many refugees themselves and a lot of people around may expect, that, okay, so you're out, of the situation, you're in a safe place, come back to normal, so to speak. Well, there is no back to normal. And I'm very sorry to be bearer of such bad news, but there is no back to normal. The healing journey from something like this will be very long, with a lot of ups and downs, but it will also have its own gifts. So there is definitely a lot of light in the end of the tunnel, but it may be dark for a while. And so, this is why it is so incredibly important, to give yourself grace and space, to process whatever feelings and thoughts and experiences are coming up for you right now. And if there is no space in your life to process right now, give you grace for that. Maybe you're just surviving and this is good enough and healing will come later. And there is another piece that may be difficult to do, and it also takes time, but it's a process of learning to recognize that others cannot make your life better or make you well, but there are lots of people that can and will support you in different ways throughout this process if you allow them to do that. And the discernment is important. So finding those people or allowing those people in who can be support and can be resource and keeping the rest out. All right. So a couple of other things that are maybe, good for both refugees and the helpers, whether it's volunteers or professionals that are working with refugees in different capacities, is this idea of taking good care of yourself, but not as a perfect goal, that like you have to take good care of yourself. And if you don't take good care of yourself, that's bad. No, that's not, how I would like us to look at it. This is an invitation and this is an aspiration, something to keep in mind while understanding that it may be hard to take good care of yourself right now because there are so many demands and so many pressures, around you. So just doing only what you can and giving yourself grace for the rest. So some of the things that you can do at times, if not every day, but coming back to that whenever you can, is listening to your needs, which may be different from day to day and even hour and from hour. They can change a lot. Um, so if you know what your needs are, you can respond to them by choosing any of the options of these other options on this slide, or more. There are, of course, many more options than this slide can, contain. But I invite you to use available resources. So there is absolutely no shame in using resources. And I say this both to refugees and to the helpers. And also, if there is resource that you can pull in to support you right now, please do that. This is what resources are there for. Rest is another very important aspect that may be difficult sometimes, to kind of like obtain. You may be dealing with nightmares, you may be dealing with restlessness during night, fears, and so forth. And this is all very understandable. And so rest doesn't necessarily mean sleep. Even laying down and listening to some quiet music, or maybe, guided meditation for a few moments, maybe a good piece of rest. And so allowing yourself to rest whenever possible. It may be micro naps during the day or little, pauses when you sit down and just breathe, deeply a couple of times. And then nutrition, of course, just eating well as much as possible. Again, I understand that it may not be possible, but just like doing the best you can and at least, eating on the regular basis, not forgetting to feed yourself. Moving is another good one. Just our body in trauma and our parts, a lot of them tend to freeze and, shut down and freeze our body. It's very adaptive response to trauma. However, when we stay in this freeze state for a long time, it starts interfering, with the ability of energy, and juices and blood and oxygen to move through our bodies. And so moving, just even taking it doesn't mean, doing some kind of sport. It means just allowing yourself to breathe with your body and even stretching, a couple of times throughout the day may be really, really helpful. And then physical contact with other people, but also with yourself, touching, hugs, feet on the ground, touching your face and feeling that touch, and of course hugs and touch from other people, those things are very, very healing. And our body actually doesn't differentiate between us touching ourselves and other people touching us. Both types of touch are very helpful when they are done from a kind and compassionate place. And then talking to trusted others, of course, is another resource here. So, okay, I'm gonna actually stop sharing here and come back to the screen and just look at the chat and just see, what people have said, okay, about meditation. Okay, so, okay, let me see here. All right. Okay, so some people, someone saying, I liked that I became aware of the vibration of energy going in and out of the body. I felt a channel of fresh wind. It was great to be in the flux. Love the two-way flow. Really, my part helped them relax. Okay, great, Great, wonderful. So I just really want to pause here, and see what questions people have about, this material that has been shared so far. Um,
Irina,
Michael, yeah.
there was a
Uh-huh.
question
Hmm.
sent directly to me on the chat. Should I read it out loud
Yeah,
to you?
yes.
Um, so let me just see who asked it. Ludmila. Okay, so Ludmila asked, is it possible that one person trying to cope with trauma develops two opposite parts? Example, dependent person and very independent at the same time.
Hmm. Excellent question. Thank you so much for this question. Yes, it is very possible. And those, parts that not only have different behaviors, right, but they may also contradict each other and have internal conflict and internal tension with each other, which is, what we refer to as polarization in IFS. It is very possible, yes, and then very common and very normal to have those kinds of polarized responses, to the situation. um, I also want to kind of like emphasize, that there is also a lot of polarization outside of people, just in the society and in the culture, around the war, and people may hear all kinds of different perspectives on the war, and a lot of things that you are supposed to be feeling and doing, and other things that you are not supposed to be feeling and doing. And so that, of course, leads to even more internal polarization and more internal contradictions, so to speak, and ambivalence inside. Yes, thank you for that question.
Thank you, Irina. We don't have any other questions right now, but if anyone has any question, please share them on the chat. We still have a couple of minutes with
Yeah.
Irina.
And I actually want, like, if we don't have any questions right now, I want just to even mention a couple of other slides here, and a couple of other things. So, for the helpers, whether you're in a professional role or in a volunteer role, I encourage you to notice your own protective responses and work with your own protective parts. On the one hand, noticing, acknowledging them, and, validating the thoughts and the feelings that those parts carry. And on the other hand, giving them love and grace. And so when we do that, when we listen to our parts, our own responses internally from the place of love and compassion, they tend to relax and de-escalate and give us space so that we can respond from a more balanced place inside. And then I mentioned this already, but I think it is worth repeating. As much as possible, please do not take challenging behaviors of wards of refugees personally. Remember that diagram, that I showed you, and that, a lot of the responses that may be coming, from people that you're helping are not directed at you and to you, even though you're on the receiving end, they're directed, towards very different people and very different processes that they have experienced very recently, or maybe even continuing to experience today. And also a reminder that you don't have to do everything and be everything, even though sometimes our parts may feel pressure to be exactly that, do everything and be everything for those ones that we are helping. That is simply not possible. And so an important question to ask is, who is supporting you? And I know that, like, I feel this in myself and my own parts. Sometimes I hear my parts saying to me, well, you're in the safety. Who cares who's supporting you? You are safe. Like, those are the people that, you need to be focusing on and you need to be helping. Well, yes. And I'm human too. And I have, limits and needs and so forth that have to be addressed and have to be tended to. So that is, really important piece, because otherwise, if we focus on just supporting others and we are not paying attention to our own supports and resources and filling our own cup, we become burnt out very, very quickly in this process because the needs are overwhelming. All right, so just looking at the chat to see, some other questions. Yeah, okay, so there is a question in the chat. There's kind of more professional question. With AMDR, there is a big focus on resourcing. How does IFS do that? Okay, there is no such thing as resourcing in IFS. However, the way that I do that, I can speak for myself, is by noticing and acknowledging the parts that are struggling and giving them support that they need. So just really asking, not imagining, not going from the head and saying, oh, like if I'm feeling sad, or like my, person that I'm helping feels sad, perhaps they need to cry. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about communications with the parts from the place of balance, openness, and compassion, and asking them what do they need, and then providing that as much as possible. And what is interesting is that very often the parts need not as much as we fear they would need. They just need to be seen, acknowledged, and validated. And when they receive that, that fills their cup greatly, and they can wait for other things if other things are not possible in the moment. All right, so thank you, Stella, for this question, and I hope that it answers it to some extent. So again, I'm gonna stop sharing here, and just really want to thank everybody for your presence and your comments and your questions, and it's a big honor to be with you and just sending you all lots of compassion and lots of love. So thank you.
Irina, thank you so much for this very beautiful and wonderful presentation. Very much inspiring and informative. Just to let everyone know that our presenters are doing these presentations for free. So it's deeply, deeply appreciated, Irina. Thank you so much. And everyone, let us know how you liked it and maybe what things you take out of these presentations for yourself.